everyone, my name is Sally Fowler. I'm the owner and trainer for Disabled Advantage. Thank you for joining me on my Patreon tier, Service Dog Questions Answered. In this question, I will be answering, how should I budget for a service dog? What do I need to consider? And this is a very complicated answer, not unlike most of my answers. So bear with me. I'm going to be throwing out a lot of numbers, and some of the numbers are stressful to think about. And I want to cover that first because I am a disabled individual. I am fortunate enough to be married to somebody who has a stable job, and he's able to help support us. I was also fortunate enough to have a little bit of savings, and I've now started this business. But needing a service dog is expensive. Maintaining a service dog is expensive. And when you're poor, which sadly now most of the population in the United States is poor, it makes it that much harder to have a service dog. And it also makes it incredibly stressful to look at the numbers. We looked at the numbers of just life a few months ago, and it was so stressful that it triggered a major stress episode for me that was really, really painful because it made my condition flare up worse. So when you're poor, you know what you have and you know what you don't have. And sometimes looking directly at the numbers in a cumulative way can be really, really stressful. And I want to let you know that I understand that. I understand that, and I know it's scary to think about, but I want more people to be aware of a lot of the costs that go into starting a service dog, maintaining a service dog, taking care of retirement, and then you got to do it again. And it's not like it would be awesome if we got cured, right? But realistically, most of us are not going to get cured. So we're going to need a service dog. We're going to need to redo this every 8 to 10 years, depending on the dog. And we're going to look at all of those numbers, and it's going to be stressful. There's not a great way around that. So if you're already having a stressful day, don't listen to this. Go do something fun and come back to this answer when you're having a less stressful day. Or listen to this answer while you do something else that helps lower your stress levels. Like if you're able to exercise, fantastic. If you want to make yourself your favorite drink, personally, I'm a fan of hot chocolate. Go do that. Come back, listen to this answer. Because it is a hard topic. And I am basing these numbers off of my experience. So these may not be the numbers that you experience, because all of us experience this a little bit differently. But I want to give my own insight, my own experience as a jumping off point so that you can have a better idea going into it if you're just starting out, if you're considering this, if you're trying to decide if you can handle paying for a service dog or not, and use that as information. Okay, so this is information. It is not, you will definitely spend this much money. There are definitely ways to save money. And I'm going to do probably another post on that because that goes off in the weeds. There are ways to save money. I'm going to cover some of those. Your experience might be different. And I also want to clarify that I am basing these numbers off of a large breed dog. Large breed dogs are used for mobility, which is what I have. Large breed dogs are going to be more expensive than medium-sized dogs and small dogs. Also, giant dogs will be even more expensive than large breed dogs for 2 reasons. 1, they eat more. Well, multiple reasons. 1, they eat more. 2, their gear has to be bigger, and so there's a bigger price tag to match the bigger gear. And 3, a lot of the times the giant dogs don't live as long, so you have to do this repeat cycle more often. But these numbers are based on a large breed dog, let's say 70, 90 pound dog. That's what I have been living with. And I give my dogs the best that I can give them, but by no means do they have top shelf everything. Okay. So where we can save money, we do, and that's reflected in my answers to this big question. So I'm going to break this down into a few sections. The first section is startup costs. The second section is upkeep costs, retirement costs, replacement costs, and end of life. And primarily at the end of this, I'm going to give you 3 more breakdowns, summaries. If you get confused, please sign up for a coaching session with me. I will do my best to explain it better to your specific situation and clear up any confusion. But let's jump into this. Startup costs. Okay. What I mean by startup costs are getting started. So that's searching for the dog. It's 6 months before you get the dog, and then it's also a year into the first year of the dog. Because the first year of the dog is either the first year of arranging your life and getting all of the things and getting the training started, or if you got the dog from a program, it's the first year of matching with that dog and still rearranging your house and getting a routine established with your dog. And your startup costs are going to change each time you do this, which is also important to take into consideration. The startup costs that we had for my first dog, I think they were higher than they were for starting Austin. And the main reason for that is because the first time around, we paid less for the dog. Robbie was only $50. He was on sale. But we had to pay a trainer close to $2,000. And this time around, Austin was more expensive. Austin was $150 for his adoption fee. But we didn't have to pay a trainer because training Robbie and my cumulative horse training experience, I am now a dog trainer, have my own business, definitely competent enough to train Austin without paying somebody else to help us. So we were able to save money there. Also, if you were to first dog, you go through a program, might be a bigger cost. Second dog, you're like, okay, I feel like I got a hang of this. I'm going to try an owner train. Might be cheaper, might be more expensive in other ways, but it also might be cheaper than starting with a program. So you can't assume that what you spend the first time around is how it's going to be every single time, because variables are always going to change. And when we were getting ready for Austin, we made various cost predictions. We already had a lot of equipment because we had equipment we were hoping that we could reuse from Robbie, like leashes and collars and placemats and bowls. But we were bringing a second dog into the house. So we had bowls, but actually, no, we needed to buy more bowls because second dog. And a lot of this stuff sounds really understandable. And you're like, well, Sally, that's common sense. Duh. Of course you would need 4 bowls for 2 dogs. But it doesn't always sound that simple in the moment. You're like, I have bowls. This is fine. And it's not. We had to buy house gates for the second dog. We didn't have to buy house gates for the first dog. We definitely should have. House gates are a great way to manage your home and limit the amount of access your dog has to your home as you're teaching them manners and building up impulse control, and they're learning how to be in your house. But second dog, we did make the added expense of house gates because we wanted a way to manage 2 dogs in the house safely, introduce them slowly, and limit the space and the freedom that Austin had access to. Because we had a house gate, we actually had 2. One of the house gates was access to my husband's office space, and we weren't quite sure how to baby proof it. So we put a house gate up, and it also became a safe space that my old man Robbie could wander into and hang out to get away from the annoying new toddler in the house. So that worked out really nicely as well. And it was definitely a worthwhile expense. But the house gates that we needed were close to like between $50 and $100 each because we have really wide doorways. And we had to find house gates that I could handle with poor hand dexterity and that had swinging gates and that could withstand the angry Maligator that was being left at home and not allowed to work anymore. And that meant more money. We also had to buy a new car harness because, Robbie had a car harness. If he's in the car, he's not sharing his car harness with Austin. So we had to buy a second one of that. And these are just like these were just, Austin wasn't even here yet, but we knew there were costs that were coming. And admittedly, for my first dog, Robbie, we didn't do a great job preparing. We did such a bad job preparing that we bought the car harness and the crate the same day we brought home Robbie. And it was stressful as hell, and I really don't recommend it. Also, we were in a 2-door, and we put both this new bewildered dog and a giant crate box in the back seat together. And it worked. We all survived. Probably made the night a little bit more stressful than it needed to be, though. So when you're looking at startup costs, I diverged a little bit because Austin is more fresh in my mind than what we did with Robbie. That was 8 years ago now. But when you're looking at startup costs, you're looking at the cost of the dog, first and foremost. It's going to be higher if you start with a puppy. And the reason for that is because if you're getting a puppy, hopefully, you're getting a puppy from a reputable breeder. And a reputable breeder is not going to give you that puppy for free. Or $20. Okay, I can't tell you how much well-bred puppies cost because every breed is different and every breeder is different, and it also seems to vary on where you are in the country, how much that puppy is going to cost. I can tell you it is not out of the realm of possibility for your puppy to cost between $1,000 and $4,000. If you get a puppy from a rescue, that puppy might be cheaper, but it's still going to be comparable to that of a dog that you get from a rescue or a shelter, or it might be a little higher because they're absorbing extra costs like puppy vaccination schedules. The cost of the dog's going to be higher if you start with a program dog. Program dogs are anywhere from free to $40,000 depending on who you are and where you are in the country and what your condition is. But even if you get a dog from a program and that dog came to you free, your startup costs are not zero. And I'm going to talk about that later. But it's important to understand that just because you get the dog for free and maybe a vest and a leash and a collar and a set of bowls and one toy and a placemat, you still have other costs. Your startup costs will not be zero. They will not even be just $100. Very important to understand. I think that's skipped over a lot of places, but that's important to understand. You're going to need to buy a crate because responsible service dog teams have crates in their homes. And crates are extremely important for a lot of reasons, especially if you're owner training. There are going to be times when you leave your dog at home because you have errands to run and they're not ready for public access yet. And it is more safe to leave them in their crate where you know they're safe than it is to leave them loose in the house to do whatever they want and hope that they understand the difference later. They don't. They will get into things. They will learn bad behaviors. They will practice bad behaviors because you're not around to enforce right from wrong. Crate, safe space. Also, even if you get a program service dog and you guys are ready to jump into public access training, there may still be times when your dog needs a crate. And times like that include if your dog is recovering from something, their crate is the safest place for them to be because it helps them stay calm and it helps them be confined and it helps them not overextend themselves. So, everybody needs a crate. You need a crate that your dog can stand up in, turn around in, lay down, and ideally stretch. But crates are weird. My first dog, Robbie, had a crate that he could stretch in. He could arch his back stretch, but he couldn't bow stretch. He could lay full out and he could curl up and he could turn around, but he couldn't really pace in it. And he couldn't sleep on his back, which he really enjoyed doing out of his crate. Austin's crate is the giant horse stall crate. He can bow stretch, arch stretch, lay full out, sleep on his back, sleep upside down, twist it all around. I'm sure y'all have seen that. He can pace in his crate, which is both good and bad. It lets him have a little bit of movement in the day, but it's bad because if he were prone to pacing, it would kind of feed that anxious behavior. So you guys are going to have to prioritize what size crate you want, but at the bare minimum, you need a crate that accommodates your dog's ability to sleep in a few different positions and turn around and stand up comfortably and have a little bit of extra room. If you're starting with a puppy, you can either buy a bunch of crates throughout its lifetime and size up as your dog grows, but they grow so fast. So fast. So what I recommend instead, get a crate, buy dividers, and limit how much space they have. If they have too much space, they'll go to the bathroom in one area and sleep in the other area, which is not something you want to reinforce. So buy dividers that make the crate smaller. Save a little money that way. Robbie's crate was about $70 maybe. I don't know. Like I said, 8 years ago and it was 10 p.m. Austin's crate, I know, was closer to $100 because it's so big. We got the crate before we got Austin, so we didn't actually know how big of a dog we were getting. We just knew it was going to be bigger than Robbie. And we always kind of suspected that Robbie's crate was just a little too small for him. And honestly, the gradation between the 48-inch crate and the 54-inch crate that Austin has now is like a really big jump when you think about it. So one thing we ran into when Robbie retired was that he hurt his shoulders, and we needed to confine him, but we couldn't leave him in his crate because then he would get to be in too much pain because he couldn't move. So it would have been better for him to have a crate that he could have gotten up and kind of wiggled some and moved around in and still stayed safe. In the end, we ended up having to give Robbie just the entire house, and it was fine. But it would have been better if we'd had a crate that allotted for that. But these are all really complicated questions that I'm not going to know the answer to for your specific situation. You just need a crate. Crates are not cheap. Unless you know your dog is really, really anxious in crates, you don't need to go out and buy the most expensive crate possible. Start with a wire crate and then make the decision to get something more expensive. Unless you just have a lot of money, want to be on the safe side. In that case, go for it. But those are much more expensive than the wire ones. Gear. You're going to need at least a 6-foot leash. Those run about $6 to $7. 15-foot leash. That runs about $20. You're going to need a collar that your dog wears in the house. Depending on where you live in the country and in your city, there are some places that require that your dog is always wearing tags in the house. I don't fall in that particular jurisdiction. One of my friends does. So her dog always has to be wearing a flat collar with tags on it. What's that going to cost for you? My dog's tags live on his training collar. You're also going to need a training collar. That's how you communicate with your dog. That's going to cost something. And then you're going to need toys, and toys cost money. They cost all sorts of money. There's toys you can get in the bargain bin for $1. Those don't last long. I only recommend them if you definitely don't want your toy to last long. And then the toys that are really good, that last a really long time, don't be surprised if you bought a ball for $25, because I've done that. And it's a really sturdy ball. It's definitely going to last a while, but it was $25. So that's a consideration. You also want to allot for your nervous first-timer ER costs. And if you've never owned a dog before, there might be more of those. If you've never owned a service dog before, and the reason it's different is because all dogs are precious, but when you have a service dog or you're in the process of building a service dog, you are building medical equipment to make your life better and make your quality of life better and to assist with a very real, very dangerous medical condition that you live with. So your service dog in your mind is your best friend. You love them. They're also very easily worth $20,000. So if you're a first-time service dog handler, there may very well be more nervous first-timer vet visits or ER runs where, oh my gosh, does my dog's tummy look weird? Do they have bloat? Are they dying? We should go to the ER. Ma'am, your dog is fine. Really friendly though. Keep up the good training. Oh no, he ate a tampon. What? I don't know. I don't want to make him throw up. Those get really big. What are we going to do? We should go to the ER. Okay, so we actually didn't find any tampons in him. He's going to be fine. Keep up the good work on the training. That's going to be $200, please. And a lot of ER vets also have a door fee where you have to pay $125, roughly. That's what our vet does, just to walk through the door. So when you make a commitment to being an anxious first-time service dog handler who's going to run to the ER, that's a lot of money. And I'm not telling you to not be nervous, because I was definitely a nervous first time service dog handler. And now we just kind of look at them and go, I think you'll be okay, but we'll keep an eye on it. And even if you aren't taking your dog to the ER, you might take him to the vet more often, especially if you're starting with a puppy. There might be something definitely wrong, or you might just be worried, but those rack up. So you want to try and budget for it. I would estimate in your first year that those nervous first handler vet runs, you need to budget about $300 to $500 to just have in case of nervousness and in case of actual emergencies, because bad stuff does happen. Not trying to scare you, but bad stuff does happen, and there is a learning curve to managing a dog in your house, and there's a huge learning curve to managing a puppy. And if you're doing it without a trainer's guidance, your puppy's probably going to get into more dangerous stuff than if you have a trainer's guidance. So that's a cost to budget for. Absolutely. So let me rewind a little bit. Make sure you guys have some numbers. Dog. Honestly, you could have a dog that you already have, so free. Cheapest dog from a shelter is probably, okay, Robbie was special, so let's say cheapest dog from a shelter is probably going to be between $80 and $200. Don't balk at that. They have costs to cover, and they work really hard. If you're starting with a puppy, it might be between $1,000 and $4,000. If you start with a program, it could be free or $40,000 just for the dog alone. Crate can be anywhere from $30. Well, no. Okay. This is based on a large breed mobility dog. So crate's going to be anywhere from $70 to like $115. Gear, leashes typically run between $6 and $20, depending on how many lengths you get and how many leashes you get. That adds up as well. Training collars and general collars typically run about $8 to $10, but nice training collars can easily cost $20. It depends on what you choose to work with for your dog. If you know you want to get an e-collar for your dog, that's going to vary in price depending on what brand you go with. I do not recommend going with the cheapest brand possible, because the cheapest brand possible will break down. I have done it. I have regretted it. First brand we got was Sport Dog. It was not reliable, and it lasted maybe a year before it gave out. Second brand we got was Dogtra. That was a $300 purchase for a 2-collar system. Great idea. Poor execution, because sitting a collar on the shelf for a while means it won't work. So we still had to pay $100 for the second collar when the second dog showed up. But the remote still works. That collar has lasted us 8 years. We've had to replace the battery a few times, but that's it, and that's been affordable, so good purchase. Educators are also a really good brand. They're more expensive than Dogtra, but some people like them better because they may or may not be better for hand dexterity, depending on what your particular hand condition is. I like my Dogtra, but I'm a little biased. Placemats. These, depending on how you do this, let's say $30, between $30 and $50. You can definitely just go someplace and buy fleece blankets. Let's see. Toys run anywhere from $2 to $6 per toy. Chew toys typically go about $25, and edible chews do not buy rawhide. It is not safe for your dog. Labeled for dogs, not actually good for dogs. Edible chews run between $9 and $30 each. Yes, they are worth it. You'll also want to make sure that you get cleanup supplies. Do not assume that Lysol will teach your dog not to go there. The cleanup supplies that they make for dogs are specific to getting rid of the odors that tell dogs, hey, this is where you should pee. So it's important that you get products that are meant for cleaning up after pet messes. I am partial to Nature's Miracle. It's worked great for me. They have a lot of different products that are really easy to use. So you're going to want to buy that before the dog comes home. If somebody tells you your dog that you're getting is housebroken, fantastic. Still expect a few accidents. They're in a new place. It's going to take them a little while to figure out the routine. You're going to need to add in the cost of food and treats. Now, treats add up. Again, you're like, of course, treats add up. That makes sense. No, treats add up, especially if you're treat training. You go through a lot. So, I think our treats are $5, and he goes through them every 2 months. So, but I'm not rewarding with treats for everything. Just very specific tasks and games get treats. In the beginning, you might go through treats faster. If you get really nice treats, like freeze-dried treats, awesome. Good for you. They're much more expensive though. So we do occasionally give freeze-dried treats, but they get saved for like really, really fun things or really, really hard things where I have to motivate him a lot. They don't get fed out every day because they're expensive. Food for a 70 to 90 pound dog, just based on, you guys might hate me. I'm fine with that. We feed Purina. I know it's not top shelf, but it's best quality we can afford. Food. And my dogs have never had a problem being on this food. So for them, you can expect for one, say 70 to 90 pound dog, you can probably expect to budget between $300 and $500 a year just for feeding them. And if you're starting with a dog under 2 years old, which you should be if you're owner training, that cost is going to be different because puppy food, it is important to feed large breed dogs food labeled for puppies and food labeled for large breed puppies. That food's going to be more expensive than your daily maintenance adult food. So that's a cost as well. And when you get to the retirement and replace phase of this equation, your retired dog is going to be eating adult food or senior food, and your puppy is going to be eating puppy food. And so then you have two entirely different food costs because they can't be fed the same food because they have different nutritional needs. Also a fun added cost. Trainer. Please hire a trainer. And I say this because I want you to succeed. I also say this because a lot of dog trainers are really good at what they do. And they deserve people to come to them and pay them for their talent. And you want to pick a good dog trainer. You don't just want to assume that your trainer down the road who's the closest to you is going to be the best person to help you train a service dog. But trainers are not just when there's a problem. And especially if you're trying to start a service dog, you need guidance. There is so much to cover and so much of it needs to happen all at once, and it needs to be layered a very particular way to prepare your dog for the job of working out in the public and at home with you reliably. And that's a really big task to do by yourself. Now, Trainers run anywhere from okay, I can't give you an estimate on trainers because everybody does it a little bit differently. I charge course by course, and my cheapest course is just agility. My next cheapest course is just retrieve. And so the courses where I'm actually teaching you all-inclusive things like bringing a dog home or bringing a puppy home or doing obedience those start at $700 and they stop at $3,000. My service dog course is $3,000. And my service dog course is just tasks and laws and being a handler and public access training. Because if you come to me and you train with me, I'm going to guide you through all of the stages of training your dog to be a service dog. And you're going to pay at each point along the way, not all up front. At the end of the day, I charge less than $10,000 to help you train your service dog. There are some service dog trainers who charge about $10,000 up front. There are other service dog trainers who charge course by course, and it's between $500 and $2,000 a course. That's a good ballpark number. If you find a trainer who says anything like, I can teach this dog to be a service dog in less than 10 lessons, no. Hard no. It will take a minimum of 6 months to train a service dog who has already gone through obedience and socialization training. Okay, so I want you to imagine that this is going to take 1 to 2 years to train your dog from start to finish, from learning all the obedience and the manners and the socialization and the public access etiquette and the task training to being a working dog working with you on a day-to-day basis. This is not a quick process. Trainers who do it cheap and fast, no. Trainers who do it expensive and fast, also no. So you need a trainer. You need help finding a good trainer. I offer that in coaching. But you definitely want to prepare for paying a trainer. The trainer that we worked with the first time around, his obedience course was $900 and it was 3 months long. And then there were additional courses that we did with him, and it stacked up to being about $2,000. And it was worth it. There was a lot of information that I thought I knew that I didn't know. So it was definitely worth it to work with him. If you have the space in your home and you have a mobility disorder and you know that exercising or being able to walk your dog are not going to be realistic at the beginning, or you know that you have bad days where you can't go for a walk, no matter how much your mind wants to, I strongly encourage you to invest in getting a treadmill for your dog, because it's a really great way to give them exercise and cut you a little bit of break. Treadmills are hard to price, honestly, guys, because manual treadmills are several $1,000s, and dog treadmills usually start at $500 and go up from there. Human treadmills can be used if you already have one. Great. If you don't, I recommend checking used equipment stores first, because they might have a treadmill that they have at a discounted price that maybe isn't safe for a person to use or isn't safe over 5 miles an hour, but you have a 60-pound dog and they're only going to be using it at 2 miles an hour, and so it's perfectly safe. Those are a few ways to save money on that. It is expensive. It does take up space. It is definitely helpful and worthwhile. And like I said, a lot of these costs are going to start even before you bring your dog home. So one thing that we did when we were preparing for Austin that we should have done when we were preparing for Robbie was I got a notebook and I wrote down what gear we were going to need and also what changes we were going to make to the house, and if what conversations I needed to have with my husband to decide things mutually, because while it was going to be my dog, he lives here too and his opinion is important. And so I planned out how I was going to manage their walks, measuring space in the house for a crate and what would fit and what we thought we could afford and what would be safest for whatever ideal dog we were going to be getting. We knew we needed to build a fence for our porch, which was a cost that other people may not need. But we had for 7 years allowed Robbie to jump on and off of our porch during playtime. And he thought it was great fun. And looking back on it, man, that was reckless. Because it was a big fall from the sky every time he jumped on and off of that porch. And yeah, that probably contributed to his shoulders breaking down. But it also contributed to him being extremely athletic and fit and well muscled. So, but as Robbie got older, we knew we needed to put an end to that. So actually, a year before we got Austin, we put a fence on the porch and retrained Robbie not to jump on and off of it. And that was an added expense. We looked at porch fences. Those are enormously expensive. So we did it country style and just got cattle panel and T-posts and then put up orange tape so Robbie could see it. And I taught him that was there. And then when Austin came along, we also suddenly had a porch kennel where I could work with one dog, then put them on the porch and then work with the other dog. And hey, it made life easier. They were never left outside alone in the porch kennel, but it was a great management tool to be able to work both dogs outside at the same time and have the other one close by. And Austin has never learned to jump on and off of the porch like a wild animal because it's never been an option for him because the fence has always been up there. So it was a worthwhile purchase, but it was a purchase that was an exception to my specific situation. So there are going to be things like that for you as well. Okay, that is just the startup costs. Let's go into upkeep costs. What do I mean by upkeep? Upkeep is anything past the first year with your dog. So these are things like if you're still seeing a trainer, great. If you have a trainer who's you're not paying them a retainer fee, but maybe they have a deal where if you were a former client of theirs, they cut you a price break on coming back to them if you have problems. Some trainers do that. So you might still be paying a trainer, at least for another year or every now and then for spot work. Upkeep is going to be after that first year and all the way through to retirement. It's going to stop at retirement. So upkeep are the costs for the life of the dog and the career of the dog. And this gets a little harder to predict because life goes up and down. But you can also expect to add on more gear. Once your dog is ready to work in public, a vest is probably going to cost between $700 and $500. And that's a really big number. And the reason for that is it depends on what you need. If all you need is a vest that says service dog, it's going to be cheaper than needing a counterbalance harness. Or we have a vest that has a counterbalance strap on it. We also have a cart harness for pulling firewood, and we have a safety vest for wearing for safety, but let me specify that. My dogs are both coyote colored, and we live in an area where coyotes are shot without question. So come November for deer season, they wear orange every time they leave the house, just without question. And then when I do field walks where my dog is off leash, they're wearing orange as a safety precaution. Also, it has a giant reflective strip on it. So if we're walking them in the dark, they're wearing that, or they're wearing a bright neon colored harness. My friend got a harness that we jokingly call a rave harness, but it's a harness that lights up and changes colors for safety at night. Her dog is black, so they wear that most nights for walks. And we have a pack for doing weighted walks, or if I go on a walk and need him to carry my camera, he does that for me. So the amount of gear that you have and how expensive it is adds up depending on the ways that you use your service dog and what you need in life. We also recently just bought Austin a car harness for off-duty time. Previously, he was wearing his work harness and everywhere, even if we were doing something off-duty, simply because it was how we were clipping him into the car. And so we recently got him a Kurgo car harness. I think that was about $70. So now he has an off-duty harness, which is nice for everybody, but his gray vest goes with us everywhere so that if he needs to switch back into service dog mode, he can, and we're ready for that. You need to decide how you're going to keep your service dog safe in the car. Are you going to use a car crate? That's good. Car crates run about $600 or more. They may not make a car crate for your large breed or giant breed service dog, in which case you may have to go with a car harness, which $70 to $80. You'll also likely need boots depending on where you live in the country. We live in a place that gets rain, mud, ice, and snow and hot pavement. So we have boots pretty much year round. He doesn't wear them all the time, but he does. The possibility of needing them every month is a very real thing. So initially we bought boots for $40 for a set of 4. And because we use them so much as a service dog, those started getting holes in them after about a year of use. And so we switched and got hard sole boots for $70. And yes, they were expensive, but those lasted 5 years. So that's what Austin has, and they're doing quite well. I walk my dogs on grass, gravel, concrete, asphalt, and store floors. So the boots get a lot of different terrain and a lot of different texture, and that can wear them out faster. We also have a weird cost for us was my husband built a firewood cart. But that was still a cost that got rolled into the price of the dog because that's what I needed for one of my tasks for moving things. And then there's the little things that your service dog needs to do its job. Like, are you teaching it to tap a bell for an alert? Are you having it tug cabinets and drawers open? Because then you need a pull tab on every single one of those drawers. And there's different ways to accomplish that, and some are a lot cheaper than others, but some of them may not be as durable as the things that cost more. Do you need... We have a step stool that Austin uses to get in and out of the truck so that we're not stressing his joints as much as we did Robbie's. That's an added expense. We already had that. That stool was $12, which is great. But if you don't have that, you need to acquire it. We have travel bowls. We have a go bag. things that we keep. The go bag comes with us whenever we go on public access trips or long weekend trips or vacation. And it's a bag that holds food and extra leashes and an extra toy and emergency medical supplies and emergency medical information and cleanup supplies for on the go. And everything that goes in there is an added cost. And all these, the thing that gets you is all these costs add up. So, okay, 100 bath wipes is $7. Great. But it's not just $7. It's $7 that you have to keep paying every time you run out of bath wipes, whether it's the bath wipes that live at your front door for muddy paws after a walk, or the bath wipes that live in your go bag for muddy paws before you go into a restaurant, or cleaning off the paws when you came out of a restaurant where the floor was sticky. Food is going to keep costing between $300 and $500 a year. You also have vet bills, which I didn't mention in the startup costs, but they do apply to the startup costs. They're just harder to estimate because if you start with a puppy, you're going to have higher vet startup costs because they're doing all of their puppy vaccines. So they're getting more vaccines than if you're starting with a dog who has completed their puppy series and doesn't have as many vaccines to do. Also, if you choose to titrate your vaccines, your costs are going to be less as well. An estimate is if you go to the vet 2 times a year, you can estimate spending about $100 total. Vaccines probably run between $30 and $80 a year unless you have a puppy. HeartGard, so heartworm medication, whether you give HeartGard or Interceptor, it's probably going to be around $60 times 2, $60 for 6 months supply, times 2, because there's 12 months in a year. That adds up to about $120 a year, every single year for that dog's life. They do have an option now where you can get an injection for heartworm preventative. That's $120 and it lasts the whole year, but it's still $120 every year. Flea and tick medicine. And heartworm preventative and flea and tick medicine is also going to change where you live in the country. Sometimes it's more prevalent in one area, and so you might be able to save by, well, I don't need to get flea and tick medicine because we really don't have fleas and ticks here. I think that's rapidly changing with everything that's going on in the environment, but it's something to talk to your vet about. Hey, do I need this? For us, we have to do heartworm medicine. We have to do flea and tick medicine. My dogs are bracing dogs. Sorry, it's still hard to not talk about Robbie. I need bracing assistance. So I don't like to use Frontline or any other type of topical because then I can't brace on my dog for a few days. We give NexGard. The downside on that is that NexGard is $118 for 6 months supply. Times 2 comes out to about $220 or $260 a year. The price keeps going up, so that's fun. And that's an added expense. In the beginning, though, we did use Frontline with Austin, and then we switched Robbie to Frontline when he retired because I wasn't bracing on him, and so we could save a little money that way. For grooming, you're going to have an adjustment period of finding the right brush for your dog. And so you might buy a bunch of brushes until you figure out what's actually best for your dog's coat style and what's actually best for how your hands work. You may have a dog who you just have to pay a groomer. And in that case, you're looking at several $100s every few months because those dogs got to keep being groomed. You might pay more for a mobile groomer. You might pay less for a groomer at your local pet store, but are they going to listen to you on how your service dog needs to be handled? Or are they going to follow a strict protocol on all dogs get treated the same way and possibly mess with your dog's likability with other people, which is a concern. You'll need to buy things to upkeep your service dog. Your service dog has to not smell like a dog when you go out in public. They need to not have an offensive odor. They need to not be muddy. They not need to be well kept. They need to look professional. They need to be brushed. All of these things take money. There's cologne that you can spray on your dog. There's detangler you can spray on your dog. We like to use dry shampoo because it smells nice and we can brush it on and then it dries and they're ready to go. And it's dual purpose because when they get a little messy, but not complete bath messy, the waterless shampoo works really, really nice for those situations. It also works as a nice tide over. I do not have the energy to bathe you this week. Dry shampoo bath. I'll bathe you next week. You're also going to have to factor in the cost of bathing your dog because service dogs need to be clean. But depending on your breed, you may or may not be able to clean them full bath very often, or you may have to do it more often. We bathed Robbie every 2 weeks, give or take. We bathe Austin once a month. Austin is huge. He's also very wiggly. We have glass shower doors. So we bathed Robbie in the house in the winter. We bathed him outside in the summer because our summers get hot enough that it was okay. But Robbie was about a third smaller than Austin is. So Austin gets taken to a local mom and pop pet shop in town once a month. We pay $15 to use their self-wash station where it's a raised tub. They have shampoo available, and towels and brushes, and we can show up and we can bathe them ourselves and brush them out and clean them, pay $15, and then come back the next month and do it again. I really like that service because also it spares me from having to bend over and bathe my dog that way. It raises him up to arm level, which is really convenient. And $15 a month, it still adds up, but he is just too big to bathe in our shower safely. And when I bathe him in our shower at home, I have to do it by myself, which is a huge energy draw because he has so much fur. If we bathe him at the pet shop, me and my husband can do it together and it's less of an energy draw. So it's worth the added cost, but it is an added cost. Hopefully when you get to your dog's career, you don't still have the nervous ER vet runs, but you might still have general, oh crap, my dog jumped into a cattle panel fence ER runs. We actually did not take Robbie to the vet when he jumped into the cattle panel porch. I called my vet and he said to keep an eye on him. And then we took him in to our regular vet for a quick visit and they didn't find anything wrong with him. So we didn't take him to the ER for that. We just observed, kept an eye on him, let him rest, and he was perfectly fine. Terrifying moment, but he was perfectly fine. But 5 years earlier, I definitely would have rushed him to the ER right then. And it would have been an extra $200 that day. Yeah, so for the upkeep of your dog, no matter how you start with a dog, I would say estimate needing $1,000 for maintenance costs of your service dog every year. Okay. Next is retirement. Okay, I told you guys this is a long question. You might go get a snack or something. So retirement costs are not often talked about, but the 4 biggest things for retirement costs that you want to take into consideration based on my own experience with retiring a dog in 2021 is healthcare, for why ever your dog was retired. In our case, Robbie was retired because his shoulder tendons and muscles calcified. He sustained an injury to his shoulders that was not noticeable enough that he acted like he was in pain or showed any slowing down. And so it wasn't until everything calcified and I noticed a bump on his shoulders developing that we got him evaluated. And at that point, he did start having trouble moving and jumping, and he didn't have the same stamina that he did. And so we retired him, and there weren't a ton of costs with that. It was offered to us that we could work up a rehab program or a nutrition program with a local health clinic, but it was an added cost. And that sounds really bad for a dog who gave me his entire life. But what we did instead was I got a book on physical therapy for your dog, and I came up with a new routine for him where he wasn't expected to take really long walks, but we still went on walks, and we did morning stretches and balance games, and we changed what he was doing. So we also switched his food to a lower calorie food, and we stopped feeding him his performance diet amount of food. And so some costs dropped off and some costs got stacked on. They moved him from 1 wellness visit a year to 2, since he was also at that point a little bit closer to senior geriatric. And we went ahead and got a house gate to give him more space when we left him at home, but still confine him so that we didn't have to worry about him re-exhibiting destructive behavior and getting into things like the trash to entertain himself. Which leads me into another cost: destructive tantrums. Okay, so when you suddenly take away your working dog's job, expect that they will be angry and difficult and pouty, for lack of a better description. And I know I'm anthropomorphizing. I very rarely get that word right. I'm anthropomorphizing, but it's true. I cannot describe it any other way. This dog pouted, and he pushed over a wooden baby gate we put up. He tore chunks out of a wooden baby gate we put up. He put dents and bite marks in a metal baby gate that we put up. He was very, and it wasn't so much separation anxiety as it was, this is my job. I must get to you. And we knew this was the case because we videotaped what he was doing, and we put up a game camera because we ran out of videotapes or video cameras. And all he wanted to do was, so technically I'm not supposed to leave the house without a service dog because I'm a fall risk. Sometimes I do. And sometimes I do because I'm doing something that's unsafe for the service dog to be with me. And other times I'm just going to run out real quick. I'll be right back. Okay. And when I do that, I do leave the service dog in kitchen place. So that, and I leave like one door cracked so that if I need to call the dog while I'm outside of the house, that's something they've been trained to do, is to go through and open all the doors by themselves and come out and get me. So what we discovered was when we put up a game camera and we would leave the house and just like drive down the road a little bit, Robbie would put himself in kitchen place, in guard mode, and wait. He wasn't destructive. He wasn't anxious. He wasn't upset. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't whining. He wasn't panting. He wasn't doing any of that. He just put himself in guard mode. I'll wait here. And so we let him do that. We didn't try to confine him anymore. And he would usually fall asleep. The longer we were gone, he would leave that spot. But as soon as he heard our truck in the driveway, he would go back to kitchen place. That's where I had trained him to wait for me when I left him. And that's where he knew to be. So there were other things too that he got a little destructive, not dangerous, but like he would tip the trash over and he didn't tear it up, but he would rearrange it in what we called art, because it was just weird. Everything was very, very carefully taken out of the trash and placed in very specific locations. Because he had been trained to retrieve gently and his job had been taken away. And so he found ways to use his job. That was just weird. But those things, like occasionally we had to clean up or, you know, the random little costs. The biggest thing was definitely the house gate that he nearly destroyed. But depending on why your dog retires, you may have new healthcare costs for them. You may have rehab costs for them. If you're able to afford rehab and you don't feel like you can do it yourself, you might have rehab costs for them. If you're trying to extend their life and extend their mobility, you might have costs like paying a chiropractor or an acupuncturist to work on them, or a massage therapist. Those are all things. They're all options that exist if you have the money for it and if it's available in your area. You may have destructive tantrums. I cannot estimate the price of those because I don't know your dog. But you should know that when you take working dogs' jobs away, they try to still use their powers. They just might use their powers for evil, so be prepared for that. And you need to find a new way to stimulate their minds and help them feel like they're doing something important. One of the ways we did that was we trained Robbie to find antler sheds, and we live in the country, so that seemed natural. And we had a rack, so we didn't have to buy that. But I did have to spend $10 on a antler scent detection deodorant stick. But it was a really fun game, so it was definitely worth it. You may also have to rehome your service dog as a retirement cost. And that's not really a cost on you unless you have to pay to drive somewhere or fly somewhere to wherever your service dog is going. And rehoming is a very difficult topic, but it is sometimes the best choice for both the service dog and the handler for financial reasons, but also for the reason I just talked about, where it's very hard to take your dog's job away. And sometimes it's better for them if they don't have to be around you anymore. And that sounds really horrible. And I am going to do a Patreon question on this later because it's so in depth. There's a lot to cover. But it's like Robbie kept trying to work. He kept trying to do his job when he saw me needing help. And I suspect that added a little bit of stress to his life, knowing that I needed help and then being told, no, you can't help me. So there might be a rehome cost to consider as well. The fourth category is replace. So you have put all this money into your dog. But now your dog is retired or they got washed out, for which I'm very sorry if that happens to you. Or they died all of a sudden. Also, very sorry if that happens to you. But now you have replacement costs. So you have to go back to the startup costs, and those might be different. They might be more, they might be less. But those are suddenly added into your life unexpectedly on top of whatever cost phase you're on, be it retirement or replace, or retirement or end of life. Let's say you still have your retired dog alive. This is what we did with Robbie. We didn't rehome Robbie. We kept him, and dealt with all of his art projects and weirdness. But this was really expensive. Okay, so when we got Austin, there was an overlap of about 8 months where we had 2 dogs together at the same time. And it's expensive. You don't think about it. I didn't think about it. All those things I was saying before were like the $7, it adds up and it keeps happening. Okay. The best way I can explain this is when you have your retired service dog and then you have new dog in training, you have to multiply pretty much everything by 2. You have to buy a second set of bowls. You have to buy and set up a second feeding area because right off the bat, you're not going to be able to feed those guys right beside each other. It's not safe. You need to buy house gates. That's an added expense. You have a crate. Fantastic. There's someone in it. You need to buy a new crate. You have a 6-foot leash. Great. It's likely being used for the one who's currently here. You need a new 6-foot leash. Okay, so all of these things sound like really common sense until you're standing there and you're like, no, this did not occur to me. And the place that it hurt the worst was with those preventatives, the Heart Guard and the Next Guard. So normally we were like, okay, $56 every 6 months for Heart Guard. It's not great, but fine. $118 for Next Guard every 6 months. It's painful when it comes around, but okay. Here's the thing. When you have 1 dog, yes, it is $56 and $118 every 6 months. When you have 2 dogs, 6 months does not last 6 months. When you have 2 dogs, you have to buy for 12 months so that there's 2 6 months worth. That's less fun. Because suddenly, you're then paying $120 twice a year for enough Heart Guard for 2 large breed dogs, and $118 times 2, so $240 theoretically. Let's hope that's right. Twice a year. So you have enough to give both dogs Next Guard and Heart Guard every single month. That is way more painful. There were a lot of conversations about rehoming Robbie purely because we were afraid we could not afford 2 dogs at once. And we made it work. But there was a really small part of us that was, and it sounds so bad, and I'm aware of it, and I feel really guilty about it every time I think of it. But there was a small part of us that was grateful when he passed away, because we were not sure how long we could afford the cost of 2 large breed dogs, needing constant preventative health care and vet care and food. Those are the biggest costs that were hitting us the most painful. And I feel like the worst person, and I feel incredibly guilty for saying that, because I miss him every single day. And we're coming up on the anniversary of his passing, and losing him destroyed me. So when I say that, it is incredibly hard for me to share that with you guys. But I want you to be aware of it, because in your head, yeah, I can handle 2 dogs. Yeah, we can afford for 2 dogs. But with the rising cost of everything, people getting laid off, pet food going up, preventatives going up, maybe the price went up because the packing materials are harder to get. Whatever the reason is, 2 dogs at once doesn't just mean 2 dogs at once. 2 dogs at once means a lot more food and a lot more of those preventative meds that are expensive. And they're necessary. So it's not even like you can just, we'll switch to cheaper dog treats, or we won't buy nice dog treats as often. No, that's not even an option with these preventative meds. And we saved a little money, like I said, by switching Robbie back to Frontline, but it still was a blow every time it came around. And it was hard for my brain fog to remember that, like, normally I can think, oh, we just bought 6 months, we're good. But when that 6 months disappears faster, it's harder. So we had to end up buying 12 months of stuff at a time, and it's just a really big financial blow when that comes around. And I want you to be aware of that. And the replacement cost, you have to circle back around to the cost of the dog. Okay, Austin was more expensive than Robbie was, but we picked a better dog the second time around. Robbie was on sale for being destructive and crazy, and he was an awesome service dog for me. But he's not what I would recommend for most people. I picked out a much more even-tempered dog the second time around because I was better at knowing what to look for. If you get an older dog your first time around and you're like, you know what, that was a terrible plan, let's start with a puppy the second time, that's going to be a more expensive initial startup cost during your replacement phase. If you need to wait for another program dog, there's that as well. And we made the assumption that Robbie's gear would definitely fit the next dog. There was room to let out Robbie's gear so that it would fit a bigger dog. And that's been the case with some of his gear. But not a lot of the stuff. We needed a whole new work gear for Austin. And that was because Austin is shaped differently than Robbie was. So a lot of Robbie's stuff, yeah, we could have let it out, but because they had different body outlines and different body structures, a lot of the stuff did not cross over. So we still had to spend money on Austin that we weren't expecting to have to spend because we thought it would work. We thought Robbie's cart harness was going to fit Austin, but it doesn't. And it doesn't by like 2 inches, which is really frustrating. But we have to buy Austin a new cart harness. So you can't, some of the stuff is going to carry over. Bowls, leashes, collars, maybe. But some of the stuff isn't. And so you may think, I can definitely reuse this counterbalance harness. And then you get a bigger dog, or you get a dog that is more lithe than stocky, or the other way around. And suddenly that harness that you spent $300 on doesn't fit the dog that you have. Now, I don't want to discourage you from getting a nice harness, because you need to get good gear that works for your dog. But it is something to keep in mind that you can't rely on that working for your next dog, especially if you're playing in the dog lottery of shelter dogs, because they all have a different makeup of what's being put into them, and they're all going to pop out just a little bit different. And even if you are sticking with a breed, it may not even be a perfect match breed to breed. But if you have gear that doesn't work for your current dog, donate it to another team. Donate it for free. Donate it at a discounted price for what you paid for it. There are so many teams who are looking for gear, and they're looking for ways to save on gear. And that's also a place that you can go to look for gear too. I have donated some of Robbie's old gear to other teams. I still have some of Robbie's old gear that if somebody comes to me and they're like, hey, do you know where I can get this? And I happen to be able to say, actually, I have that. Would you like it? I'm going to do that because I like helping other teams. The final phase is end of life. And end of life is going to change depending on your situation. I know, tired phrase. The brain fog can't think of different words. I apologize. We had a really hard day last year. And it was made weird because we had to pay for it. And I understand why we had to pay for it. I'm not ragging on that. I'm not complaining, but it's just like, it's a really weird, surreal moment of, okay, so we've decided we have to put down my dog today, but we need to make sure that we take the checkbook and the credit card and the debit card so that we can definitely afford to pay for this, whatever it's going to end up costing. Actually, when we took Robbie to the ER, we didn't know for certain that he was going to be put down, but we both kind of suspected that that's where we were going. But before we left, we had to take several forms of payment with us to make sure that we could definitely afford to pay whatever we were walking into. And it's like a weird, you're in total state of grief, but some part of you still has to be practical and remember that there's money coming. As it turned out, I believe it was about $300 total. It might have been closer to 500. I actually don't remember. I'm sorry. We had to pay for the gate fee, and then we had to pay for x-rays that they took of him. And then we had to pay for the shot to euthanize him. And I believe it all came up to about $300 or $400. And then when we were signing the paperwork, they said, hey, would you like to add a paw print impression for $35? And at the time, it's like, this is the weirdest menu order ever. But I'm really glad we did get the paw print impression. So that added to the bill. But now we have this wonderful keepsake of him to go with everything else that we have. And we opted to bury him ourselves on our family property. So we didn't have the added cost of, there was an extra cost if they wanted us, if we wanted them to bury him somewhere or cremate him. So we didn't have that extra cost, but you might. It's going to depend on what you decide to do. A lot of there's a lot of options now where you can like turn your pet's ashes into a necklace or sculpture or something like that. So depending on what you decide to do, that's going to be a cost as well. But yeah, it was a really hard day. It was a really weird day financially too. But it's a cost that I want you guys to budget in, because, and it sounds really bad. But I want you to budget it in so that you're not surprised. That's the wrong word. I want you to budget it in so that if that day comes, you can afford to have your dog taken care of on that day. And when you're having a good mental day, look it up. Try and find what that cost might be in your area. See if there's a vet who comes to your home during normal hours, or who comes to your home during off hours and does the euthanasia at your home, because some vets do offer that and it can be really helpful. But it is a cost that needs to be considered into the grand scheme of things. And if it goes smoothly and it isn't a catastrophe, that's what you can estimate. If it's a catastrophe where they have, or some drawn out thing where they have cancer, so you do pay for it, or they need surgery, so you do pay for it, and then they still have to be put down, there's those added costs as well. We didn't get pet insurance because it wasn't really going to pay off for us financially. But it might be something that you consider as well. And you've gotten to the end of life for your first dog. Maybe you have the second dog already. Repeat. So if you're not likely to get cured, you're going to be working with a service dog every 8 to 10 years for the rest of your life, until you're at a point where you cannot work with a dog anymore. So you're looking at this repeating over and over and over again. This is not like buying a car that you hope is going to last for like 20 years. I don't know if cars last 20 years anymore, but it's a nice thought. This is something that these dogs wear out. They get sick. There's added costs that pop up out of nowhere, like they get injured, and you have to pay for that. You have to maintain them. There are some people who do grants to help cover the cost of service dogs, but it's largely not a thing. And I'm going to give you a summary now. I'm going to give you 3 different summaries. Okay. So summarizing everything I said in the last hour and a half of talking, based on one large breed mobility dog. If you owner train yourself and you get a shelter dog who's between 8 months and 18 months old, you can estimate that year 1 will cost between $1,000 and $4,000 for just year 1. The maintenance costs you can expect to be about $1,000 a year for that dog's career. And then you're going to repeat that in about 8 to 10 years. If you do a program dog, year 1 can be anywhere from $1,000 to $40,000, depending on, remember to factor in the price of the dog, but then also the price of everything else: crate, vet, gear, food, grooming, all of that stuff. Maintenance will be about $1,000 a year. Food, vet, grooming, toys, miscellaneous. And then you're going to need to repeat that in 8 to 10 years. And your repeating depends on how you want to do this. If you know you want to stick with program dogs, you're going to have to get on a wait list. And there might be 3 or 4 years overlap or 2 years overlap. If you're going to look for a puppy, you probably want to start looking for a puppy 1 to 2 years before you know your dog's going to need to retire. We wanted to start looking for a dog when Robbie turned 8. As it turned out, we needed to start looking for a dog when Robbie was 7. If you're going the route of a breeder puppy, year 1 is going to be between $1,000 and $10,000. And the reason for that is the cost of the puppy, but then also the cost of all of the gear and the toys and the gear as they size up and grow and all the cleaning supplies. And that adds up real quick. And from 2 months to 18 months, you can expect to do, or if you're doing a breeder puppy, $1,000 to $10,000. That's an estimated price based on looking for the puppy, finding a breeder, and paying a trainer. 2 months to 18 months, you can expect $1,000 to $2,000 to get from 2 months to 18 months just for gear and food alone, and cleaning supplies and grooming and all that stuff. And then their career/maintenance is back to $1,000 a year, and then repeat. I know talking about money is really hard, and these numbers may have given you pause. I'm not trying to discourage anybody from partnering with a service dog, but I am trying to discourage people from partnering with a service dog and thinking that it's going to be free or cheap, because it's not. I would say also, we had a savings account that was originally called Emergencies, and it had about $5,000 in it, and that account quickly got renamed to Robbie. And it's money that we just used on Robbie. So I would say if you're able to, and you don't have a service dog yet, or even if you do have a service dog, start an account that's just for them and put money in it and save, so that you know you have money earmarked just for the dog. It will help with some of these surprise costs. It will also help you keep track of where you need to tighten your budget a little bit so that you can be sure you have money for those preventative costs. Or, okay, well, their boots are starting to tear. Is there a way we can fix them? Is there a way we can keep working with boots that have holes in them? If, self-wash is getting too expensive, is there a way you can bathe your dog at home to save that $15 a month? In some ways, I am fortunate in that I had a little bit of money saved ahead of time, and I could put that into Robbie. And then it just kind of became, well, we have to spend this because it's for the good of the service dog. And the good of the service dog is for the good of me, for my health, and for my well-being. And a lot of these are costs that you wouldn't have to have if you worked with a different type of mobility aid. But those costs are different, and it's hard to compare them because, your wheelchair isn't alive. But they're their own costs associated with a wheelchair. For instance, the wheelchair I need, we definitely cannot afford because I actually don't think it exists. And even if it does exist, what I need is an all-terrain wheelchair that doesn't shake or vibrate or need me to actuate it. Which, even if that creature does exist, it's going to be really, really expensive. So the point here is that I think a lot of people get into partnering with a service dog and they don't realize how much it adds up to over time. They think it's the same as owning a pet dog. And it's really not. I don't know how much owning a pet dog a year is, but I would guesstimate that it would be about $1,000 a year at this point. But when you add in the service dog, those costs go up because you're buying nicer food, nicer toys, nicer chews, nicer gear, more gear, and paying a really fancy trainer to help you. If you already have several dogs and you're considering adding a service dog to the mix, that's going to be a bigger financial burden because your service dog may have different costs associated with it than your pet dogs do. And training aside of trying to figure out rules for the service dog and rules for the pet dogs and making everything consistent, it's going to be an added financial burden on your life to have multiple dogs and a service dog. And I'm not trying to be cruel. I'm not trying to be harsh. I'm just trying to help you be prepared as best as you can that starting a service dog first year, definitely the most expensive. And it does go down from there. Your maintenance costs get more manageable. But, you know, if you're having a really hard time with affording food, with affording groceries, with affording basic healthcare, as much as you may need a service dog, it may not be a realistic option for you. And I really hate to say that to people. But it may be, it's definitely something that you can budget for. It's definitely something that you can approach financially, but you need to be willing to look at the numbers long and hard and do some research. Make a list of go on Chewy and look up what crates cost and what collars cost and what different foods cost. And if you're going to feed kibble or raw or frozen raw, how much that's going to cost to feed your dog each month. Come up with a spreadsheet of how much you think you're going to need to pay into your dog every single month for their service dog career, which depending on the breed, the career is 8 to 10 years. And then there might be 2 to 3 more years for retirement and then end of life costs. And if you're really great with numbers, fantastic. This will be easier for you. If you're not really great with numbers, you can sign up for a coaching session with me and we can try and go through some of this together one-on-one. If you have any questions for me, you can set up a coaching session or send me an email or a message. Thank you for bearing with me and listening to this very long Patreon post. Again, my name is Sally Fowler with Disabled Advantage.